Hey, we are glad you're with us as we continue our series called Friends. This week, we are diving into a thing that feels like something that we all ought to know how to do, but maybe we actually need some help with it along the way, and that's making some friends, making friends that are more than just acquaintances, more than just companions, people that we trust our lives with and we walk deeply together with. Jump in today, get the message notes below, and here we go with the message on making friends. It is so good to find places where we all belong, right? And we just want to be the kind of people like that don't just sit back and passively wait for it to come to us, but to be the kind of people that proactively take some initiative and gather people around us. It's not just us gathering in buildings, it's us gathering together around people everywhere we go and inviting them in Jesus' direction. And if you've been around here for the past couple weeks, we have been talking about exactly that, about how we find and cultivate the kind of friendships that God actually made us for. We just know there is so much joy in our life that comes from the people in our life. It's because it's not the things that matter that much. It really is about the people who matter to us that make our lives meaningful. And we just know that life is missing something if we don't have the kind of friendships in our life that matter to us. I like watching this one survival show on TV, and the whole premise of this show is to survive as long as you can. Obviously, I think that's probably the premise of all those survival shows. But what they do is they drop these 10 people out in the wilderness, and their job is to survive out there and to stay out there longer than all the other survivalists. And if you stay out there the longest, you get $500,000. The catch is you have to do it alone. And no crew, no camera crew, no other people. They get a visit from a doctor like once every couple weeks or something, but that's it. A satellite phone for when it's time to tap out. I was curious, the longest anybody has ever stayed out by themselves was 100 days. And that's only because they offered them $1 million if they would do it. Before that, the longest anybody had ever stayed out with the smaller $500,000 prize was 87 days. And that show just highlights the fact that friendships aren't just a nice thing for us to have. They're not just an accessory to us, right? They're an essential to our life. It turns out that our relational God has baked his relational nature into all of us. And beyond just the enjoyment factor of having company around us and having friends around us, friendships are also one of the most shaping influences in all of our lives. I mean, it's why parents care so much about who their kids are hanging out with, right? Because we know that those relationships shape us and are going to shape them. We need people around us, in fact, if we're going to get shaped for better, if we're going to grow. Let me put it this way. When you are all not around, I'm fine. I'm pretty awesome, actually. You ought to see how unselfish and how pleasant I am when you're not here, right? You should see me. It's only when I get around you that I find out how much work I got to do. It's only when I get around you that I find out how selfish I actually am and how much I actually need to grow. And then I find out this, and like we all know, God uses connection with others to do something, some of his very best work inside of all of us. Like anybody with close friends that have been influential in your life know that this is true. You know how much better you are because of the other people that are in your life. This isn't just a nice way for us to live. This is God's way. This is what God meant all along. And it's why we have all felt a longing for, maybe we've all felt at one time or another, gratitude for the kind of friendships that the book of Proverbs describes for us. It says this, it says, there are friends who destroy each other. Ever had one of those? But there's the kind of friend, there's a real friend that sticks closer than a brother. The challenge for us is, how do we make friends like that? How do we make friends that stick together like that? How do we gather up people who go from acquaintances or just familiar faces to actually being the kind of people that we could call friends? How do we go from just being friendly to people to experiencing deep and authentic friendships? Well, if we're gonna have friends like that, there's a couple things we gotta know. First, it does not happen by accident. Like if friendships like that are gonna happen, it's gonna take some intention. It's gonna happen only by intention. Like we can look backwards and feel like we kind of stumbled into these friendships, but along the way, there was some intentional activity that happened that caused us to go from being just friendly to each other to actually being friends. Now, I want to tell you, there was a time in my life where I found myself without a whole lot of close friends. And it might have been because I didn't really want any. See, I was working, don't judge, I was working, raising kids. I had plenty to do, but all of that just became an excuse for not really cultivating any kind of friendships around me. And to add to that, I'm kind of an introvert. So alone seems just fine to me. That's why I like that show so much. I'm thinking, that looks pretty good every once in a while, right? I mean, I knew I needed friends. I just wasn't so sure I wanted any. And then this guy I know, who's a little annoying, started bugging me about getting together. I mean, I'd known him for a long time, and he started inviting me to get together with him and this other guy I'd known for a long time for dinner. I mean, all under the guise of this other guy needs some help, we should go help him. But he just wanted to gather up a group of guys. And I found myself having to ask this question, how involved do I really want to get? And the best answer I could come up with was not very, actually. And I realized something. Just because I knew these guys for a long time, and I mean like 20 years, a long time. I knew these guys for a long time. And we had shared experiences over the years. We were very familiar with each other. I even called them my friends. But we weren't exactly experiencing friendship, even though we were very friendly. My friend was being intentional. He was intentionally leaning in to gather up some guys to experience some real friendship with, and I had to decide if I was gonna be intentional or not myself. And when I took a step across that line, what I found out was that I gained friendship that I desperately needed. And since those early days of just three of us guys getting together, eating steaks together, we've gathered up some other guys. And now we know a kind of friendship amongst a few of us guys that we will cherish for our lifetime. I'm convinced. And this is what I've learned. Thanks, that's great. This is what I've learned. To make friends, you have to decide to. Friendships are not gonna make themselves. But there's a careful dance in this too, right? And we feel it because you can't force it either. Like I was a part of this small group way back before I knew any better. And there was somebody who showed up in this group and we were talking and we were chatting and stuff. And finally this guy says, I am gonna be your best friend. And I was smiling on the outside, but on the inside I'm going, nope, no we're not. Because that is not the way it works. Right? You cannot force your way into good friendship. So how do we do it? Well, the good news is that Jesus sets us a great example for how to do this. In fact, one of the first things Jesus did when he launched his mission and his ministry on this earth was to gather up a crew of 12 guys. You might have heard of them, right? And start building relationship with these guys. And as his ministry went on, he continued to add other men and women around him who would learn to follow Jesus as their teacher and Lord, but would eventually learn what it meant to be friends, not just with Jesus, but also with each other. And so Jesus leaves us kind of this blueprint that we can look at to help us know how we can step into those kind of relationships. And it's found in John chapter 15. In fact, we've been looking at this passage through the last couple of weeks of this series. And the verse says this. It says, this is my commandment. This is Jesus speaking, by the way. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way that I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay one's life down for one's friends. And then he says, you are my friends if you do what I command. And as conditional as that sounds, we'll get back to that here in a little bit, all right? But he says this, he says, I no longer call you slaves. I no longer call you servants. You're not just these people that are tagging along, following me as your master, right? Because a master doesn't confide in slaves. He says, now you're my friends, since I have told you everything the Father told me. In this passage, we get this blueprint, we get this roadmap for moving from acquaintance to friendship. And you see the progression in this where Jesus says, now you are my friends. He's saying, look, something else used to be true about our relationship. I used to call you servants. I used to call you something. We had a different kind of relationship that was way more transactional. You know, you do something for me, I do something for you. It was way more of that. But now something has happened and we've become friends. So let's unpack these verses and learn from Jesus' example how we can step in to friendships like that. Look what he says first. Remember, he said, this is my commandment. Love each other, get it, in the same way that I loved you. And that just begs the question, what kind of way did he do? What did he do? Like, if we're gonna love like he did, how did he do it? The first thing Jesus did in stepping in our direction was this: he moved toward us. Jesus moved toward, this was his first move of friendship. He took an intentional step in our direction. He came out from behind the curtain of heaven and made himself known to us. In fact, in the book of Philippians, the Apostle Paul says it like this. He says, even though Jesus was in very nature God, though he was God, he didn't think of equality with God something to cling to. But instead, what did he do? Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being so that you and I could get to know him. Jesus made himself known. He made himself accessible. He moved in our direction. He took the first step. In fact, I want to tell you, if you want to understand what the Bible is about, the entire Bible is not a record of people trying to make their way to God. The entire Bible is a record of God coming near to people. Jesus' friendship with his disciples began as Jesus stepped out from behind his safe environment of heaven and allowed himself to be known by us. And if we're gonna go from being just companions to being confidants someday, we're gonna have to do this. We're gonna have to take down our guard. We're gonna have to be willing to step across the line. And there's a line, right? You probably have felt it. I felt it when my friend was bugging me about going out to dinner with him. There was a line that I was gonna have to cross if I wanted to step into that. You might have felt it when you went out to dinner or maybe just went hanging out with some potential friends. And on that drive home, you had this conversation, maybe with your husband or your wife, maybe you just had this conversation with your health, and the conversation went like this: they seem nice. Yeah, I wonder if they could really be friends. But then you had this thought: what if these people are weirdos? Like, what if these people are messy? What if these people have baggage? And we feel the guard go up. We feel the line get drawn in the sand. Well, listen, if you're gonna have a friendship with any other person, I can pretty much guarantee you that they're gonna be weirdos. They're gonna be a little messy, because we're just people, and all of us have mess, right? But if there is a chance for any of our relationships to go any farther, we're going to have to take a risk. We're gonna have to go one click deeper. We're gonna have to step across the line. We're gonna have to let our guard down. If you're gonna love like Jesus did, you're gonna have to take a risk on some imperfect people. And you're gonna have to move into the splash zone of their mess. And just remember, they're having to do the same thing with you, too. Listen, if you're like me, maybe some of your past experiences have told you that people are just problems. And let me tell you, some of them are. And we'll get to that in a second. But right here is where we get to decide how much we're going to risk this. How vulnerable we're actually going to be. You see, Jesus moved closer even though he could have been rejected, and he was. He moved closer even though he could have been misunderstood, and he was. He moved closer to us. He stepped across the line even though he could have gotten hurt, and he did. He still took the risk of being vulnerable. And if we're gonna step into friendship, this is where it begins. If we're gonna watch for people who might become partners and friends and go any deeper, we've got to let our guard down enough to take another step. And no, not everybody is going to become friends like that. Not everybody are going to become our close partners like that. And they're not meant to be, right? And yes, there are people we should watch out for. There are people we should move away from. In fact, the book of Proverbs, man, if you want to take a great study this week, just get out your Bible app, look in the book of Proverbs, and then search the word friend and see how it shows up throughout the book of Proverbs, and it will give you clear, practical instructions about who you should move closer to and who you should probably be moving farther away from. It's a great study through that. Listen, we definitely need to apply both wisdom and risk as we take down our guard. But we know if we're going to develop anything more than just casual acquaintances, we're going to have to take some risk. We're going to have to take a step. We're going to have to let our guard down. So maybe you just do this. Maybe you just ask God, God, with whom could I take my guard down a little and test the water of friendship? And who in my group of acquaintances, my group of companions, who might I be willing to take a risk with to just take the guard down a little bit and begin to test the waters of friendship? This is step one. The next thing Jesus says to us in this passage as he goes on is this. He says, yeah, take your guard down, but then do this. He says, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Now listen, few of us will ever have to literally lay our lives down for our friends. And Jesus was obviously referring to the way he would give his life as a sacrifice for the forgiveness of all of our sins. And these guys would find out about that in just a couple days from the time Jesus said this. But there is a way in which he invites us into this, to offer our lives to others like he did. In fact, he says this is how great love expresses itself, by offering our lives for the good of others, by showing up with their best interest in mind and offering the good that we have for their good. In fact, the Apostle Paul, he modeled this as he was dealing with this church in Thessalonica. He says this about these people that he had developed this kind of relationship with. He says, look, we loved you so much that we shared with you not only God's good news, we didn't just share the gospel with you, but our own lives as well. This is what Jesus is talking about, that we lay our lives down for our friends. Jesus is saying if friendship is going to grow deep, it'll grow deep when you and I bring something to the table. Friendship is not passive. Right? It's going to look like us doing at least a couple of things as we lay our lives down for one another, as we bring good to the relationship. The first thing it's going to look like probably is this. We got to invest some time. Friendships only grow over time. There is no substitute. Like growing friendships is like gardening. It's cultivating. It's nurturing. It is not manufacturing. It does not happen in a hurry. Good friendship does not happen when we're in a hurry. And maybe, like I was, maybe we have gotten so busy and we have let our busyness get in the way of us laying down our life for others. Listen, laying down our life means giving of our time. I heard somebody say it this way. They said, look, it takes 6 weeks to grow a squash. It takes a lifetime to grow an oak. You got to decide what kind of friends you really want. Yeah? Growing friendships takes some time. But it also means this. It means bringing good. Like we got to show up in the relationship offering some good. This means offering support and care. It means offering empathy and just a listening ear. But it also means that we show up with perspective and with wisdom to offer, with encouragement, also to show up with challenge at times, to challenge somebody in the direction of God. Laying down our life means bringing the best that God has given to us and bringing that to the table of friendship. Remember, it is iron that sharpens iron. It's the metal of our character that impacts the life of another. And for us to develop deeper friendships, maybe we have a little growing to do so that we have something to offer to the people that we're friends with. The Apostle Paul talked about it this way. I love it. In the book of Philippians again, he said this. He said, so this is my prayer, that your love will flourish and that you will not only get this, love much, but well. Do we know how to love well? Learn to love appropriately. He goes on and he says this. He says, you need to use your head and test your feelings so that your love is sincere and it's intelligent, not just sentimental gush. Paul is saying we need to have something to bring to the table. Now look, none of us is perfect, right? We just said that. Now, we're all kind of messy. We're all on a journey, but the more we grow in our character, the more we have to offer in friendship. And then the deeper our friendships grow. Can I just tell you, you know this, no one's best friend is a taker. Like, takers do not develop these kind of relationships. A while back in our little group of guys, one of the guys in our group told us that he was going to get married. Now, we've been watching this process a while, but this was a big deal. Like, the minute he said this, we were like, whoa, let's pause for a second here. This was a big deal because he had had two previous marriages that had failed, and one of them ended in a very difficult divorce. And after working through some of that, he had started dating again, but he had made it very clear to us and very clear to the person he was dating, he was not going to get married again. He did not want any part of getting married again. So you know what we did? We went to work on that brother. And for a year, we would talk about things he didn't want to talk about, and we'd ask him questions that he didn't want to answer. And we would press into things that made him uncomfortable to the point of silence. But he stuck with it, and we stuck with it. And after a year of that, he told us he was going to propose. One of his other friends, we found out, was throwing him a bachelor party, and this friend invited some of us from the group to go. And so a few of us went and showed up at this bachelor party that we were going to have. And let me tell you, the riotous night of partying that a bunch of middle-aged men had at this bachelor party. We ended up sitting around this fire pit. And all of the guys in the group gave our friend the best advice they had on what would make a successful marriage. It was so rich. So rich. Isn't that great? And this friend told me later, he said, you know what? He said, everybody outside of these group of friends, everybody was telling me that marriage was stupid. I shouldn't even bother with it. But he said, that night gave me hope and encouragement that this was going to work. And he's enjoying a great marriage now. Can I tell you, our little group of guys, man, every one of us has benefited from all of the rest of us. Listening, supporting, challenging, working together at stuff, offering hospitality, advice, prayer. These guys have laid their lives down for each other and for me. And I tell you, I've got a band of brothers now that I can trust with my life. I would trust my family with them, trust my struggles with them. Friendship is not for the takers. It's for those who want to bring something to the table and contribute something to the lives of others. There's no greater love that you can have than to lay your life down for your friends. So if we want deep friendships, we got to take our guard down. We've got to have something to offer. But look what else Jesus says about this. He says, look, you are my friends if you do what I command. Now, some of you are going, now we're talking. That's what I want. If I just got to get me some friends who will do what I command them to do, and then it'll all be good after that. Where do I get in line for that? Right there. This is not what he's saying, all right? It's because it sounds so conditional, doesn't it? We can only be friends if you do everything I say. Well, that sounds like parenting a little bit, right? But that's not what Jesus is saying. Remember what he commanded? He told us back in the verse we looked at before. This is my command, love others in the same way that I have loved you. What Jesus was saying was this. Look, I am on a mission to express God's love in this world. Remember, God so loved the world that he gave his only son, right? That Jesus was on a mission to express God's love in the world. And he says this, when you join me in that mission, when you link arms with me in that mission to love the world like that, our friendship is going to deepen. We're gonna have a deeper level of relationship when we join together in this mission of loving the world back right side up. What he's saying is this, that friendship always strengthens when we do something meaningful together, right? You've seen this happen on sports teams, not the Cowboys, but other sports teams, that, I don't know, they're my team, man, I don't know what they're doing, but but other sports teams, you've seen this happen, right? It can happen around projects at work. You might have seen this happen around social causes or around families who experience some kind of health crisis and the family rallies together. When people partner together towards an outcome that is bigger than themselves, friendship grows. Because they walk away from those experiences saying, look, man, we pulled together. We believed in each other. We trusted each other. We made this happen, and we know that we can count on each other. Friendship's not just about hanging out and watching the game together. There's nothing wrong with that. Do that. But it deepens when we live in purpose together. So if you want friendship to take another step forward, just ask someone to join you. Like, say, look, I'm going after this. I'm working on this. There's something that really is important to me. Would you come and join me? It's why around here we're constantly saying, find some people to go after God with. Find some people that you can rally around and say, man, we're gonna go after God together, and we're gonna be bad at it at first, and we're gonna get better at it, but we're gonna go after God together. It's why we're constantly saying, hey, around here there's tons of opportunities. There's teams you can join to serve others. This is not just to get the work of the church done, right? There's partners around our community that our church partners with. You can go serve with them. We do those things because we know that in those things, not only will our trust in God deepen, our trust in one another will deepen as well, and that's exactly what God had in mind for us. God will bring good to others through you and your friends. And God will bring good to you through others and your friends as well. It's always mutual. It's always reciprocal when we step into something together like that. Our little group of guys, we're going after being better guys together. That's what we're doing. And we got this one guy in our group, and again, he annoys the heck out of us with this because he's got this napkin that he writes all these questions on, and I think he's actually put it in his computer now, but he calls it the napkin, right? Because he started writing down all these questions that nobody wants to answer, right? These questions that are so penetrating and probing, we're like, stop it already. And he gets the thing out and he says, let's answer one of these questions. We're like, oh boy, here we go. And we end up having this great conversation around a topic that we probably all need to take some time on, and it's helping us to get better. We band together around being better guys. And I'll tell you, we're all a little bit at a time becoming better guys for it. Right? If you want friendships to deepen, do something meaningful together. But then finally, Jesus says this. He says, look, I no longer call you slaves. He's talking about a particular kind of servant that they had in that culture. It was called a bond servant. And it was this agreement that a person would reach with a wealthy landowner or somebody who had means, who would say, I need a place to work or I'm gonna be out in the cold, and I will commit to be a servant in your household, and I commit so much that you can mark my ear with a hole in it just to show that I am your servant. It was that kind of relationship. It was like an employee plus. I mean, it was a whole different kind of deal than we experience these days in our culture. But he says, I no longer call you slaves. I no longer call you these kind of servants, because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. There's a separation there in that relationship. But he says this, now you're my friends, since I have told you everything the Father told me. Now listen, it should be no surprise to any of us that the thing that converts friendly into friendship is trust. Right? We know that if a friendship is going deeper, trust is, if any relationship is going deeper, that trust is going to have to grow. We're back to that crossing the line thing again, aren't we? And that's exactly how it feels when you have to do that, right? When you have to trust a little bit more. So we all know this is where it gets real, because trust always sets the depth of friendship. Trust always sets the depth of any relationship. And look what Jesus did. He said, I have told you everything. Now, why was this such a big deal that Jesus told them everything? Consider the enormous risk he was taking in telling people that he was the Son of God come in the flesh. I mean, look around at your friends. What would happen if you showed up in your group of friends and went, hey, okay, I got to tell you something about me you probably didn't know, okay? I'm Batman. I mean, what would that be like, right? Listen, Jesus was taking an enormous risk in telling these people somebody shows up in your group of friends and says, just want to let you know, I'm God, right? The friendship over at that moment, right? I mean, this is a defining moment. This was a piece of information that got Jesus nailed to the cross by people who started out as friendly to him. And he was confiding it in this group of followers. He was trusting himself to them before he asked them to trust themselves to him. It's risky. It was risky for Jesus. Didn't work out so well with one of those guys, did it? It's vulnerable. But I want you to think about this. What piece of information about you are you afraid to share with your friends because of what you think it'll cost you? That's where the rubber hits the road. Isn't this the thing that keeps us at arm's length from each other? Isn't this the thing that keeps us away? Man, we can talk about a lot of stuff, but I don't know if I want to talk about that. But we know this is where friendship finds its depth, where it takes the final step towards a bond, towards a commitment, towards real friendship. You want to develop friends and not just acquaintances? Slowly, carefully, thoughtfully, prayerfully, vulnerably confide in each other. Be willing to say the last 10%. Be willing to talk about the stuff you don't want to talk about with anybody. Find the right people that you can grow in relationship until you get to this point. This is where a relationship finds its depth. So, if it's going to happen, we got to walk a process, right? We got to take down our guard. And we got to be willing to bring something to the table. And we got to do something meaningful together. And we got to confide in each other. This is Jesus' blueprint for how we go from just having some people we hang out with to having people we deeply do life with. When we begin to cultivate this kind of relationship, when we begin to go from companion to confidant, from acquaintance to partner, from just familiar face to friend, we begin to experience the kind of friendship that sticks closer than a brother. So it really comes down to this, doesn't it? Who are you going to invite closer? Who are you going to invite closer? Can you think of a person? Is there somebody that just comes immediately to mind that you go, wow, we've known each other for a while. We've been just kind of walking parallel to each other along the way. Maybe now it's time to invite them a little closer. So I want you to do this, because we're not about just hearing the word. We're around here. We're about doing what God says, looking into what God says, and then doing it, because we know that the more that we do that, the better our lives get. So let's do this. Why don't you pull out your phone and pop open your text messages. And don't start texting a bunch of people right now, okay? We're not done. We'll get there in a minute. But just look at those names. And maybe somewhere in the notes in your phone, or maybe on a piece of paper somewhere or something, you could just write down 2 or 3 names of people that you're going to invite closer. And if you really want to get serious, write the date down that you're going to call them. Because way too many times, man, life comes at us and we need people around us. Yes, we've got the Holy Spirit in us, but even He is prompting us to reach to people. You know that because you just felt it. So who are those people going to be? Here's what I want to do. I want to leave you just a second to be serious about this, to write those names down, to maybe write a date down that you're going to call them. And as you do that, just pray, God, help me to step across the line and help me to bring something good to the table and to begin inviting someone into doing something meaningful together and to slowly begin to confide in another person. God, help me to walk the journey from being friendly to being a friend. So who could you invite a little closer? I mean, who could you take a risk with? Take the guard down a little bit and invite closer to you. Maybe just get out your phone and look through the list of people that you have texted over the last couple of months and see if there's somebody in there that God prompts you to, that God brings to mind, that might be that kind of person that goes from just a companion to being that kind of friend. Take the time to do that. Build those relationships. Take a little risk and see what God does with that. We're glad you've been with us. If we could come alongside and help you with that, go to canyonridge.org. There's all kinds of resources to help you in this journey of finding people to walk together with Jesus. And then also, you can hit subscribe, join us every week, invite friends along with you. We'll see you next week.